Hey, just wanted to show off some builds I made for my scout class in Deep Rock that I find fun to play. What I'm showing here are builds that work pretty consistently for me in Hazard 5. These are optimized for fun first and foremost, so they aren't going to be the simplest or even the easiest builds to use. The intention behind them was to shake up gameplay and focus on some niche tactics as opposed to finding a panacea build that solves all problems. Think of it almost as a showcase for some of my favorite overclocks because most of these builds use them as the cornerstone of their tactics. Anyway, hope you like playing them as much as I do. Let's get going. First up is my generalist loadout I like to call the Elementalist Scout. When I say generalist, I mostly mean it's what I use when I don't have a clue what I'll be up against, or at least I expect to deal with a lot of swarms for the most part. This entire build is built primarily on the Deepcore GK2 assault rifle and the Bullets of Mercy overclock for it. This overclock causes you to do bonus damage to targets afflicted by burning, frozen, stunned, poisoned, and electrocuted status effects, which is a trade-off for the lower magazine capacity. The upgrades I use on this build for the Deepcore here are 2, 2, 2, 3, and 3. The goal with these is to maximize fire rate and damage for the weapon to take advantage of the small window of opportunity you have to fire at afflicted enemies. The weak spot damage and fire rate are interchangeable depending on what you want. The last mod is important though, since inflicting stuns gives you a way to increase your damage to bugs without any additional help. As for the jury-rigged Boomstick, the mods for this gun are all about igniting enemies as fast as possible. The configuration I go with here is 2, 2, 3, 3, and 3. I also use a simple clean overclock called Stuffed Shells, which increases the pellet count and damage slightly. This means you're more likely to ignite enemies in 1 or 2 shots no problem, even at mid-range. I go with improved blast wave here to help a bit with swarmers, but blow through rounds is also an excellent choice. While using this build, it's a good idea to either bring cryo grenades or IFGs as your grenade. Cryo grenades are always good, but I go with IFGs because it gives you more in reserve and lets you be more liberal with your grenade use. I also sometimes take the Born Ready perk since switching back and forth between weapons is a big part of the build. This build gives you the unique tactical goal of trying to inflict as many status effects as possible to enemies to save on ammo and deal more damage. You have the tools to inhibit entire waves of bugs by yourself, or the ability to follow and help a teammate who's inflicting them like a driller. I think this build is really fun to use and it makes the scout great at handling groups of enemies solo as well as making him an extremely helpful ally. My alternate build for loadout A using the M1000 is very similar. I use 2, 2, 2, 2, and 1 for my mods on this rifle. The overclock on it is electrocuting focus shots. The idea here is to use the hipfire of the M1000 as basic damage output, and to utilize the weakened focus fire to inflict electrocution and slow bigger targets down. The real fun comes when using the Zhukovs SMGs as a backup weapon. With the mod config of 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, and a custom Casings overclock, the Zhukovs become a source of burst damage whenever you've successfully electrocuted an enemy. They're even more dangerous when you use them on a group of bugs stuck inside an IFG effect. This build is similar to the first except for the fact that electricity is the only status effect you care about here. This one's nice for switching your focus to larger bugs and taking out specific threats like menaces and spitters, but it also has pretty good crowd control just like the first. Loadout B is all about precision for me. This is the one I like to use for Mactera plague hazards especially. The first build here uses the M1000 with the same set of mods as the last one, with 2, 2, 2, and 1. Only this time, I'm using the Hipster overclock to put all my eggs in the hipfire damage basket. I still have stun on my charge shots just in case I need to give myself some breathing room, but this rifle is mostly used to pump out shots quickly and accurately. The reason I have the M1000 set up this way is because I'm using the Cryo Minelets overclock for my Zhukovs that are set to 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2. This config lets me use blow-through rounds to damage ground-based enemies and penetrate the target to still lay down Cryo Minelets beneath them, causing anything that's not dead yet to hopefully freeze. That's when I pop out the M1000 again and quickly shatter all the frozen bugs in front of me. These Cryo Minelets will also be your best way of dealing with Praetorians without having to use the Cryo Mines that you took for swarms. It's much better to use those on the Mactera. Getting above it and using your blow-through Minelets will let you damage it, freeze it, and delete it with your M1000. My B loadout alternate build consists of turning the Deepcore AR into an extremely accurate equivalent to the M1000. I use a 2-1-2-1-1 mod setup with an AI stability engine overclock to completely remove recoil and the need for accuracy mods in favor of pumping the damage instead. You can add more ammo or magazine capacity if you feel you need it, but the whole point of this build is to leverage your accuracy as a player. It takes some getting used to, but it's very fun to use. You don't have quite the burst you used to have, but being able to hit automatic fire on distant targets without any deviation at all never gets old. The Boomstick here is all about damage and accuracy too. This will be your ace in the hole in case you need something dead now. The setup is 2-2-1-3-2 with the shaped shells overclock. The reduced spread allows you to hit flying enemies more effectively, and stun can help you stall a goo bomber from spitting for a bit. Improved Blast Wave is just there to help you deal with ground-based enemies easier, and Fear the Boomstick gives you an opportunity to hit weak spots when enemies turn around to run. This build is relatively simple, but it allows you to assist your team with those pesky flyers that you don't outright remove from flight with your cryo grenades. It's also just a really interesting change for both weapons that feels really different, especially if you're tired of having to walk a crosshair down to compensate for recoil all the time. For my C loadout, I've made both builds exclusively for dreadnought hunting. Fighting dreads is all about exploiting small windows of opportunity as the thing exposes its only weak point to you. The scout is the only class that's consistently fast enough to exploit this weak spot during almost the entire fight, so long as it's not following you. So that's exactly what I had in mind for both these builds. For the first one, we're back to using the M1000 again, but this time in a very different way. Rather than using focus shot as a utility option, it's now the primary source of damage for this gun. The supercooling chamber overclock allows for this usage by massively increasing the damage in exchange for slowing you and the weapon down as well, effectively making the thing an anti-material rifle. The mod setup for this is 2-1-1-2-1. This is geared towards inflicting as much damage as possible into each focus shot you take. Seeing as the magazine of 8 rounds is actually only 4 when you're using focus shots, you'll want to make these shots count. The Zhukovs, usually playing second fiddle to your primary, are now going to be your main source of damage when dealing with most bugs. They're set to 1-1-1-3-2 configuration, focusing on maximizing ammo capacity and fire rate with the help of minimal mags overclock. These SMGs end up kind of being boring comparatively, but they offer a reliable option for dealing with lesser bugs during the mission without forcing you to use up all your M1000 ammo before you encounter a big boy. This build does wonders during the fight so long as you keep in mind your positioning and timing during the dreadnought encounters. It's a lot of stop and go, so make use of your grappling hook. There's also the added benefit of the souped up charge shot straight up deleting anything you land a weak spot hit on, unless it's got a sizable HP bar. The final build I have here is an alternate loadout for my dreadnought killer. Using the Deepcore and the Boomstick combo, these are both maxed out to deal as much damage as they can in short order. Same strategy as the M1000 build before, but now you want to be in at least mid-range to close range to deal that damage as opposed to hanging back and fishing for the shot. The Deepcore mods here are 2-1, 3-1, and 2, and they aim to pack as much of a punch as they can in with every shot. The overclock, aptly named overclocked firing mechanism, helps this by increasing the fire rate to insane levels so you don't waste a second when the dread has its back turned to you. This can be a bit hard to control with the massive recoil, which is why being in range will help. For this final Boomstick config, I just maximized the damage output with 2-2-2-1-2. The Jumbo Shell's overclock furthers the damage in exchange for less ammo and slower reload. This means you'll probably want to save your shots for more important targets, and hopefully most will find their way into the exposed abdomen of a dreadnought if you can help it. There's nothing particularly fancy going on here, just uncontrollable fire rate and as much damage as the scout can dish out. This is probably the simplest build I use on scout, but who can argue with the results? Alright, well that's all of them. After tons of playtime, I ended up settling on these builds because they're just so damn fun to use, and I hope they serve you well too. Get out there and show those other classes that you can do more than mine ceiling ore and light up the room. Also, I stream on twitch.tv as Sirven, same name. Be super cool if you drop by. Thanks for watching.